and welcome back to another episode of the Enchantiverse podcast. My name is Sky, and I hope you're feeling festive because today we are going to be talking about the man, the myth, the legend, jolly old Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus. I literally can't wait to talk about Santa with you guys. I've thought about a lot of different titles that this episode could be. The history and symbolism of Santa Claus. It could be how to have a more magical Christmas, and it could also be titled The Art of a Believing Heart, or all three. We'll see what makes the final cut. But that being said, we're going to be covering a lot of ground here today. We're going to be talking about the symbolism of Santa Claus. We're going to be talking about the history of Saint Nicholas, and we are going to be really, really delving into how to have a more magical Christmas and all the beautiful, amazing things that this jolly old elf still has to offer us today as adults and living in this modern, postmodern world. So I know usually we start with an imagination exercise. Today, our imagination exercise is going to be later on in the episode. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to get going here. So I don't know about you guys, but I have now been an official adult for 11 years. And please don't hold it against me. But in these past years, being an adult, I have recognized a few different Christmas phenomenons amongst my fellow adults. And I think that this is the episode to perhaps address them. The first that I hear a lot of people say, a lot of fellow adults, is that Christmas doesn't feel like it used to. That as the years have gone by, something has changed. It just doesn't feel magical anymore. They don't get as excited. There's just something missing. And the second is regarding a denial of the existence of Santa Claus. Now, I know it's super common amongst Christians to sometimes have some wariness about Santa Claus as a figure. I know there's a concern about wanting to make sure that when we're trying to build up a testimony of Jesus in our children, that we're not instilling any sort of doubt into our children or making them feel lied to in any way. And this point is so understandable. I just want that to be clear. So this is in no way meant to be parenting advice for what people should do with their own children or any sort of judgment on what people choose to do with their own children and in their own families. This is simply my perspective of the Santa Claus legend and of its interesting mingling with the celebration of Christmas. So my initial guttural reaction to when people insinuate that Santa Claus doesn't exist is, in all honesty, what are you talking about? Of course he exists. Of course he's real. So that's like my instinctual, like deep within me feeling when I see it portrayed in a movie and someone says like, oh, it's just like the Tooth Fairy, it's just like Santa Claus, just like the Easter Bunny, these kinds of things. When you talk about Santa in that way of, well, it's fake, not real, made up, something within me completely juts up against that and is like, no, that's not true. So when I get that guttural feeling, I know that there's some sort of truth there and something deeper to uncover. And I like to do a lot of research until I can kind of understand why I'm feeling that. And I typically realize that there's some sort of truth there to uncover. So let's all start from the beginning. What makes something real? I want to ask you that question. Is it matter? Is it a sum of physical parts? Is it a breakdown of individual physical parts? Living in our modern age, typically the first way we try to qualify things is by the material. Okay. Now, in my view and in my philosophical beliefs, in my religious beliefs, in terms of my value structure and my value system, it's not accurate to me that what makes something real is not its matter. It's materialist identification. Okay. It can't be. And I'll explain. So if something only existed because we could see it or because it was made out of matter, then how would love be real? Or beauty or truth? Goodness? How could those things be real? But yet they are, and we experience them every day, and it's the frame with which we view the world. And obviously these things are highly debatable, right? We have a lot of different perspectives. People have their own ideas of God, of believing in a God, of not believing in a God, of what God is, what he looks like, what is he made out of. There's so many different opinions there, and I won't dare dive into all of it today. We're going to focus just on Santa for right now. But if from my view, with something like a Santa Claus, it's actually even more easily identifiable as being something real than those non-material things I was describing earlier. Because with Santa, we know what he looks like. We know his countenance. We know his temperament. We know what his job is and where he's from. And almost everybody has also experienced him. We've seen him in books. We've waved at him at the mall. We've written him letters. We've made him milk and cookies. And on Christmas Eve night, as little children, we felt his palpable magic as we drifted to sleep, waiting for reindeer to land on the roof and for Santa to climb down our chimney. We've also most certainly experienced the joy that he brings when we rush to the tree in the morning and open the presents that he's left us. Those are real experiences. And as we get older and learn that there might be helpers in the household that deliver these gifts, does it take away the past experiences? Does it nullify the magic? Does it take away the realness of Santa? Now, I know a lot of people have different experiences with this. We all have had our own childhood memories associated with Santa Claus. And as you become an adult, as you get a little bit older, and you might learn that Santa might not work in all the ways that you thought. It can be heartbreaking for a child. It can be a little like world shattering. It can be a little bit confusing, right? But my argument for this is, does it take away the realness of Santa? My argument is no. Because, let me explain. Because who is making Santa's household helpers deliver these gifts? What is the reason why there are household helpers that help deliver these gifts? Who's moving their hands to do so? You may say tradition. You may say a sense of obligation. But a tradition of what? A tradition of Santa. Okay? The reason is Santa. Santa is the one moving those hands. Moving those hands to act and to participate in the cultural tradition. So, it's an interesting perspective. I know it might be a little bit outside of the way we normally think about things. I encourage you to try and kind of step into this different way of thinking that I'm trying to help you understand. So whether it is because you feel an obligation to conform to tradition or because you love the tradition, the idea of giving gifts on Christmas Day is directly from the story of St. Nicholas. So who is leaving the presents when all is said and done? And who is inspiring families to lay out presents on Christmas? Once again, it is Santa. And even if, say, your family doesn't participate in this tradition, that is where the tradition comes from. It directly comes from Santa. It comes from Saint Nicholas. So even, like I said, even if, we don't do Santa in our house, but you still give a gift to your spouse, or you still do give gifts to your children, or you still do give gifts to your neighbors, that tradition itself is directly linked to Saint Nicholas. So let's talk a little bit about who Saint Nicholas is. He was a monk who lived back in 280 AD, so about 280 years after Christ's death, and he lived in Patara, which it's kind of described now to be like a modern day Turkey. It is the area he was in, and he lived during a time where the Christian sort of popular thing to do if you were a monk living during this time and in this area was to sell everything you had and to give your money away and follow Jesus and go and live in solitude and just basically pray, kind of become a hermit, a monk. So that kind of monk is what I'm trying to say. So he converted to Christianity at that time. So he wanted to follow in that tradition, in that trend. So he wanted to give everything he had, but he didn't want the praise to go to him. So what he did to give away his inheritance was he would go to people's homes at night and put money through their windows. And it would often land in the socks or the shoes that were hanging by the fire. A really popular story about this that has survived throughout the years is there was a father who was going to sell his daughters into slavery because he didn't have enough money for their dowries to marry them off. And St. Nicholas heard of this family, and he went and delivered through their window enough money for the first girl's dowry that was of age. And so he left it through their window, and the girl was able to get married and be safe. And then when it came time for the next girl, he did the same. And then when it came time for the third girl, the father was expecting him and caught him. And, St. Nicholas said, "Don't tell anyone, I want the glory to go to God." And that's the story, that he saved these girls, these children, from slavery. And that's a really cool story. So that is how we've got the tradition, and how that idea of leaving your stockings out by the fire or by the window have formed, and how that sort of took root. So it was said throughout his whole life he did this. He gave all his money away in secret and helped the poor and the needy and the sick and afflicted. And he was known. He grew in popularity, even though he never wanted any of that glory to go to him. His stories grew in popularity and in legend, and his name spread, and he became known as the protector of children, and that he was there, always watching, looking out for the little ones. And he was really cool. He did a lot of other things. He was present at the Council of Nicaea. He basically, I think he was the bishop. I'm forgetting the church. I'm so sorry. But he ended up practically starting the Greek Orthodox Church. He's like their main saint, and it's why you see so many Greek Orthodox churches these days that almost all of them are named after Saint Nicholas. And so because he was so well loved and he followed Jesus so devoutly, he was canonized as a saint, and his saint day was on December 6th. So throughout, all these different countries, December 6th became the day that some traditions took place for St. Nicholas's feast day. So the Dutch started the tradition of Santa Claus, and Santa Claus would come. It was started during the feast as an occasion to help the poor and put money in their shoes, and it evolved into putting presents into the children's shoes, and there was a wild feast. And Santa Claus had like the bishop's hat. So you'll see like old illustrations of St. Nicholas or Santa Claus wearing the big bishop's hat and in some different colored clothes. And this was because it was an homage to St. Nicholas and him being a bishop. So because he was the bishop of the church. So they also had this fun tradition where they would elect the students would elect one of their classmates as bishop on St. Nicholas Day, who would rule until the 28th of December, which is Innocents' Day. And sometimes they would act out the events from the bishop's life. And so traditionally, St. Nicholas Day was a separate day from Christmas. Okay. Christmas is December 25th, and St. Nicholas Day was December 6th. Now, in these countries, once the Reformation came on the scene with Martin Luther, he took away all the saints' days. So there was no more feasting for these saints, and there was no more celebrating these and having these big celebrations like they were used to. But the Germans, they liked the gift giving. They didn't want to get rid of this this tradition. They liked the tradition. So what they ended up doing, and what Martin Luther had them do, was he moved the gift giving that used to take place on December 6th in celebration of St. Nicholas to December 25th in celebration of Christ's birth. And he declared that we would have this tradition because all gifts come from the Christ child. And the word for Christ child in German is Christkindl. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like the other word we use for Santa, Christkringle. So that's how we got the phrase Christkringle. For whatever reason, Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, has been so intertwined with Christmas. And because he's been intertwined with Christmas, he's also been strongly tied to Jesus and strongly tied to Jesus as the Christ child. I find this idea that for whatever reason, St. Nicholas seems to be simply fated to be associated with the day of Christ's birth, and even fated to be associated with Christ himself, super interesting. And as someone who believes that all things have meaning, I think it's important to spend some time with this idea. So why are these two so linked? I think that there are a wide variety of reasons. The first being that every story of good or story of generosity and magic is an echo of the story of Christ. I think there's no way around it. And while there are parts of the story of Santa Claus that the world may have embellished or invented, it doesn't change the fact that even the embellishments and inventions still reflect Jesus. Like, let me just lay out some of the symbolism here. Santa lives where? The North Pole. Jesus lives heaven, northward. Elves being Santa's helpers. I think that's another fascinating connection, because angels and elves have always been related or interpreted as being a similar or the same thing. And there's a historical link for that name of angels and elves. I think that it's interesting, the idea with Santa of keeping track of who's been naughty and nice, who's been good and bad. We see ties to that with The Book of Life, Santa's list. It's almost an echo of the idea of the Book of Life, where the deeds of mankind are recorded and the angels take note, and there will be a judgment, right? Of that to account to. The idea of this love of children, this love of the innocent, this saving of children and of the innocent, and protecting the poor and the needy. I think that the idea of gift giving comes directly. It's linked directly to Jesus, of course. It's linked directly to both of them. I think that the symbolism of Santa being dressed in red and white, we see those colors are so symbolic of Jesus Christ, him being white and spotless, white as snow, and taking on the sin of the world. And we have that verse of, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. It's a direct link, the colors, to Christ. The idea of him coming like a thief in the night. And I think the last and one of the most important, I think, with this discussion is the idea of belief. And so I think it's fascinating, this idea that it's important to believe. Why do we teach children? Why do we do that culturally? Why do we teach them about Santa Claus? And why do we teach them about the importance of belief? Because that's been the tradition for years. You still see it in signs at places like Hobby Lobby. This you'll see the quote, "I still believe," when it comes to Christmas, right? I think that is one of the most fascinating points in this discussion, for me, this idea of belief. Because I think it needs to be said that both stories have elements to them that are filled with things that the world likes to call impossibilities. We have flying reindeer, elves, angels. There's virgin mothers, this sense of agelessness, a level of omniscience, and an ability to see the deeds of humanity. Those are things that the world would say are impossible. And is that a coincidence that both of these stories have that in them? I don't think so. Now, some people say one is true and one isn't. One story is true, one story is not. Some say both stories are not true. But I don't hear it talked about very much. I don't ever really hear this said, that both are true. Okay? And to me, that's the answer that makes the most sense. Let me explain. Could it be that the story of Jesus, the story of Santa Claus, are so intertwined because maybe Jesus loves St. Nicholas? Think about it. It's a story of faith, of charity, of love and peace. It's a story filled with magic and impossibilities, so-called impossibilities. It's a story that makes children squeal with delight, and it inspires belief. It nurtures a believing heart and tunes the heartstrings of children to love goodness, to live better lives, and to love believing in something wonderful. On top of it all, St. Nicholas was a real saint. This was someone who gave their whole life to Jesus, who wanted to do everything in his power to be like him. So, we know that in the scriptures, the people who did this have been forever linked to Jesus in his story. We have examples of that, of Mary in the Bible, who Jesus says will be remembered because of her actions toward him. There's countless saints that are remembered for being tied and linked to Jesus, whether it's because they were so close to him or because they embodied his spirit, because they gave everything they had for his name. So, this brings me back to the first problem that I addressed at the beginning of the episode, which was adults feeling like the magic of Christmas has been disappearing, feeling like it's not how it used to be. Now, I'm not claiming to have all the answers here, but I do think I have some insight. I think that part of the reason why it's not like how it used to be is that you used to believe. Really and truly believe. Could it be that when you stopped believing in Santa Claus, a part of you, even if it was just the smallest part, stopped being as believing in general? Some people might say yes, but it's because their belief was founded in something that wasn't real, right? This idea that because Santa worked in mysterious ways, in ways that they were not previously aware of, that it made him unreal. But we've already talked about how though it might look different, the idea of Santa Claus, it doesn't take away the fact that Santa Claus is a real thing. Santa Claus, St. Nicholas is a real person, and Santa Claus is real. Okay? So a more accurate statement would be that your belief was altered once you realized that Santa's methods might work in mysterious ways, or that he uses the people around us to accomplish his purposes. Could that not be said of God? Now, I want to take a step back and address, I'm obviously not saying Santa is God. I'm not saying he is Jesus, or even that he's the same as Jesus, and it's something that St. Nicholas himself would never claim. I'm just trying to identify a pattern here. The patterns of these stories have significance. They have meaning. And the pattern that I see here is that believing brings feelings of magic, delight, wonder, and awe. And not believing brings a sort of disenchantment, feelings of cynicism, analytical judgment. There's a little bit of that ennui, that feeling that something's a little melancholy and stale. There's a staleness to disbelief. I think that there is a true magic that comes from this belief. And when you're a child and you are in your bed at night and you're imagining where Santa is in the sky, and you're imagining that maybe that little noise you heard was the footsteps of the reindeer on the roof, there's a magic in believing that. There's a true sense of wonder and awe, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and it's something that I think that is a gift, because it tunes the heart of a child. I said this before, but I really believe it tunes the heart of a child to love that sense of wonder and to love that sense of magic and to open their mind to the possibilities that things are happening that they might not see and that they might not know. I think that sometimes we recite the Christian story so much that we have forgotten how miraculous and awe-inspiring it really is. So this is where our imagination practice for this episode is going to come into play. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to really delve into your imagination with me for just a moment and think of the reality of what I'm about to say. There was once a young woman who was a virgin, untouched, unmarried. She became pregnant. What? Do you realize just how magical that sounds? An angel came to her and told her she was going to bear a son. And untouched, unmarried, she became pregnant. She is given this opportunity to give birth to him, this child, amongst the animals. And on the night this child is born, there's a new star that appears in the sky. Angels come, and shepherds follow the star to see him. That baby grows to walk on water, to turn water into wine, to heal the sick, give sight to the blind, and hearing to the deaf, to cast out demons, calm storms, and raise people from the dead. When this child himself is killed, he rises from the dead himself and promises that he'll do the same for all of us, that he will take away the pain and the reality of death and sin. Do you see, really picture it? Imagine a new star in the sky, angels, miracles, walking on water, casting out demons, raising people from the dead. This story of Jesus, it's filled with, quote, impossibilities. Filled. The story itself is what we would say is an impossibility to this natural mind and to especially, I feel especially in this postmodern world. So I think Santa, it's a reminder that in order to experience magic and wonder, we have to be open to believing without seeing, and even believing without fully understanding. And I hope that makes sense, what I'm trying to say. Because for those of us that are Christians, it can be, there's a lot, I think there's a lot of people that hold belief that it's important that we teach that things that are fairy tale like and magical, that those aren't real, and that those are falsehoods, and that they're taking away from the truth of Jesus, that there's a fear there. I think that this idea that some Christians have about things like fairy tales, things like magic, and I'm talking about like fairy tale magic, not like dark magic, not talking about that, and I hope that that's clear. I think that it's understandable, and I see where people have this perspective, and I see their perspective, but I disagree, because I don't think we should be scared and have fear about things like fairy tales and magic and Santa Claus. I don't think that these stories take away from the truth of Jesus. Rather, I think that they all point directly to him. And so having this fear of these things that inspire wonder and these things that inspire hope and belief, by fearing that if people believe them, that they will be, it's almost like there's a fear that if we believe in these things, that we'll be crushed when we realize that they're not true. And I'm trying to, with this conversation, kind of turn the question on its head and turn your perspective around a little bit to see that it's not that people are going to be disappointed to find out that all these things aren't true and then to doubt, but rather I believe that all of these things are true, and that by believing in fairy tales, by believing in Santa, by believing in the beauty and the magic of story, we will come to find that it's all true, and it's all made true in Christ. There's a great quote from, I think it's G.K. Chesterton, where he talks about myth and how Jesus is the true myth. He takes all the myth from the past. He takes all the story and the rich imagery and symbolism that's in everything, and he brings it all to life. I think that joining together in this Christmas season by opening up our hearts and minds to belief, returning to that childhood perspective and that childhood heart of what it was like to really believe in Santa, and what it was even like to believe in baby Jesus from a child's perspective, I think is what will give Christmas all the magic and meaning that it always had as a child. And I'm really not trying to offer like a cute little quip, how we normally might express things like, oh, be believing this Christmas season, right? Like that, it sounds like something that you might, again, see on a Hobby Lobby sign. And because it's on a Hobby Lobby sign, we sort of take it as kitschy and cute. I'm trying to say it in the most real way. I really am saying that you should believe in Santa Claus. I really am saying you should believe in the baby Jesus, and that by thinking about these stories and putting yourself again in that perspective of a childlike heart of how you used to maybe look at these things in the past, or how you once did before, and if you haven't done it before, then it would be a good thing to try now. But try to look at it from this perspective of genuinely giving it the chance to be true and really thinking about the reality of these things and imagine them. That's why imagination is so powerful. Imagine them happening. Before you go to bed, try it. Try the exercise of laying down, closing your eyes, and imagine the events of these stories really taking place. Imagine the new star appearing in the sky. Imagine what that would have been like for Mary to be visited by an angel and to fall pregnant. I don't know if fall pregnant is the right term, to become pregnant and to give birth in this cave surrounded by animals, and to have angels come again and just think about it. Really imagine it as reality, and it will, I know for a fact, it will bring back that magic that's been missing from Christmas. And because the Santa has been tied to this day, St. Nicholas, which, by the way, another little fun fact, the way we got the name Santa Claus is from when we established New York. It used to be called New Amsterdam, and so the Dutch, there was a lot of Dutch that founded New York City, and so there was a lot of Santa Claus customs, and the term, the way that people started to say it was Sant Niklaus with St. Nicholas, Sant Niklaus, and it sounds like Santa Claus. So that's how we got the name. And there was a lot of, I think it was Washington Irving that in one of his books, he deemed St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, the patron saint of New York City. So anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that because the story of Santa Claus is linked so irreparably, really, with the story of Jesus and with the day of Christmas, I think that you can't get away from the symbolism of him. You can't, we all want, Christians, we all want a Christ-centered Christmas. But Santa, he's there. And I don't think that it's a bad thing that he's there. And I don't think that it's, that he's just a marketing ploy from companies to try and have us overconsume this holiday season. I think that he's there because St. Nicholas was a man who lived a Christ-like life. And I find it really interesting, how sometimes the things that we accept as fake or fantasy, they're often the realest things in the world. And I mean that truly from my heart. I think that Santa Claus is actually a pattern of reality itself and what it means to live a life of faith, a life of belief. I'll explain. So during my day-to-day life, things can often get stressful. Things can go wrong or go in ways that I did not anticipate. They can look dark. I can feel off track. And I used to live life with a lot more of an anxiety mindset. I used to seek control over everything. And when things went askew, I was completely overcome with feelings of dread, fear, hopelessness. And I've really tried to change that over the past 10 years or so. I don't live that life anymore because I decided to live a life of faith and trust instead of fear. So now when things go wrong or look as if they could go wrong, I've really stopped stressing about it. My go-to thought now is God will provide. God has always cared for me and he always will. I have nothing to fear because I'm just a child in the Father's house and Christ is my provider and protector. So that has been my way of getting out of this anxiety mindset. It's been my way of living a life of faith rather than a life of fear. And it's been really life-changing for me. It's made life feel a million times more magical because now when problems arise in life, I'm almost excited to see the creative ways and the loving ways that Jesus cares for me in those moments. It's become now an opportunity to see him provide for me. And I fully rely on him. And I've discovered that this is the realest way I have ever lived. This is the reality of living a life of faith. Because time and time again, Jesus has snuck in like a thief in the night and carved out a way for me and my family. When there's been times where I don't know how we're going to financially survive, time and time again, he has snuck in like a thief in the night and carved out a way. When I've not known how I'm going to go on emotionally from devastation and from traumas in life, time and time again, he snuck in like a thief in the night and carved out a way for me. And in the modern age that we live in, it taught me to be fearful. It taught me to analyze everything, to believe that bad things are always on their way. And when things were dark, I would search and search for the ways to control the situation. And when I couldn't, it was just, it's a hopeless feeling. And the funny thing is that even though I did that through all those times, Jesus still provided a way for me. I just put myself through the worst of it first. I put myself through that sort of hell first, and it wasn't necessary. Discovering that life worked, like the life of faith and of relying on Jesus, discovering that works and that's how reality actually functions, is that he is always the protector and the provider. It's been one of the biggest blessings in my life. And I was believing in something either way, either believing that things were terrible or believing that I'm on a path toward the wonderful, believing that bad things are on their way always, or believing that good things were always on their way, believing that nobody could save me but myself, or believing that no matter how dark things looked, Jesus was coming for me and I wouldn't be left behind. So this might seem a little off track, but this does relate to Santa Claus, because I think that the story of Santa is a shadow of this reality. In the winter, in the world when things are at their coldest and darkest, there's something beautiful and wonderful to believe in and look forward to. There's magic coming, and it's something that shouldn't be possible, but it is. And he comes like a thief in the night to bring joy during trial and darkness, to give children what they need: toys, clothes, games, things that are very important for them. And the hands that are behind it all are whose hands? In the story of Santa Claus, whose hands are behind it all? The hands of the father, the hands of the mother in the home. Just like when St. Nicholas would do his charitable giving while he was on earth, who was behind it all? When St. Nicholas went to those windows at night to leave money for poor children, whose hands were behind his? The hands of the Father. Do you see what I'm saying when I say that this story, it's a pattern of how reality works? That when things are dark, that when things are cold, you will not be left helpless. And I believe it's true. And we can see why St. Nicholas, who did this for people over and over and over again through his life, why he would be linked to the Christ child. Because the story of Jesus, and I want to do another episode on the nativity, but the story of Jesus is that when things are dark and cold in the world, a baby is born. When things are dying, this new life is born. Just like how spring follows winter, in our lives, the Christ child follows the times where we feel like we are dying. He is the answer. He is the new life. He gives us the new life. He is the new life, but he gives us that new life. And he's this bright star in the night when things are dark. So I hope you can see this pattern here. I hope you can see the tie. And if you're a Christian, I hope that you can feel more confident that the story of St. Nicholas is something that is really beautiful. It's shadows of the story of the Christ in a legend in fairy tale form. And it's something true. There's some quotes that I really like from C.S. Lewis. I'm going to read. One of them, he says in his book, The Problem of Pain. He says, when you were a child, you were more able to believe in magic and to appreciate the beauty of the world. I'm afraid that as we grow older, we lose the sense of wonder that makes us ready for joy. And I see that here. That sense, that sense of wonder, that belief in magic, it's what makes us ready for joy. It's why, again, I think it's the missing piece to the joy of the Christmas season. We can't live in a world that takes the meaning out of everything. The meaning out of Santa, the meaning out of Christmas itself with the Christ child. We can't live in that world and expect and believe in the postmodern interpretation that things have no meaning, that things are only in place to take something from, to gain, to build up power and profit. We can't live in that world and accept those realities and expect the joy that we had when the way our mind functioned was believing in magic and appreciating the beauty of the world. We just can't. So we have to return to that. We have to return to that childlike mindset. There's another one from him where he says, we are in the hands of the great magician, and if the magic works, if the wonder is real, then we must believe in it wholeheartedly, just as we believe in Father Christmas at the age of innocence. He goes on, Father Christmas is one of those figures who serves to make the mythic and magical world more real. He is a gift bringer, but his gifts also represent the return of hope and goodness to a world that had been under the tyranny of winter. I love that. There's a really good quote from the Polar Express that says, seeing is believing, but sometimes the most real things in the world are the things we can't see. For our book club for the month of December, we read The Little Prince, and it didn't necessarily jump out to me as like such a Christmassy read. Obviously it doesn't have to be for book club. But the more I thought about it and the more I thought about the symbolism in that book, the more I'm like, wow, it is actually so perfect for Christmas. Because the themes of childhood that run through that book and the themes of having to see truth through the heart, they're just so poignant. I don't know if you've ever read that book before. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's so good, so filled with wisdom, so filled with so much good symbolism. But there's a really great quote. There's a few really great quotes, but one of them that I wanted to share says, and now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. I feel like that is so perfect for this idea of Santa Claus. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. I think that's so true with these kinds of ideas that we're talking about in this episode. Sometimes we can't explain. Sometimes it's hard to find the words of the things that we know are true, or that we feel are true, the things that hold beauty and wonder in this world. And it can be difficult to try and explain the importance of those things, which is something I'm trying to do, funnily enough, in this podcast episode. And I don't know how effectively I'm doing it, but I'm trying to. I hope that I'm able to put some of these words together for thoughts or feelings that maybe we've all felt for so long, but like it's hard to pinpoint exactly why something is important, something is essential. And it's one of the things that I try to do with this podcast is to try and do that. But sometimes there's not words. You just can feel it with your heart. And what's essential is invisible to the eye. Sometimes you can't even see it yourself. There's another great quote from The Little Prince that says, "Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them." And that's kind of how I feel about stuff like this. Like, sometimes you just know what something is. And I love how children have that ability to know what they want and to know truth just so easily. It just comes so easily and so poetically to them. And yeah, I personally, again, this is just me, but I don't think that I could ever doubt a child's love and belief in Santa Claus. I just couldn't. And therefore, I don't try to fight my own inner child's love and belief for Santa Claus. And maybe it is just as simple as that. With all this explanation and all this exploration, which is so fun, to me, the exploration of these ideas make them come more alive in my life, and they help me to find the meaning that I used to just have come so naturally. It kind of reignites that, and it helps me to see the magic again, and so we do things like this podcast where we sit down and we talk about the meaning, but funnily enough, children, they already know the meaning. They already have that within them. So a lot of what I try to explore really is just getting us back to the mindset that we used to have as children, and to truly believe and understand and cherish that mindset, and to know that it is our childlikeness that brings us to the meaning in our life. It's in the Bible that Jesus even tells us that to inherit the kingdom of heaven, to enter into heaven, we must become as a little child. And so I think that becoming that little child again, over and over and over again, and allowing yourself to believe, allowing yourself to trust, it's really what gives us and what brings us to salvation. It's what brings us to the feet of the Master. So honestly, it's just another really beautiful reason why this belief in Santa, I think, brings us closer to the feet of God, because we are having that childlike believing heart and loving the things that we loved in that age of innocence. I think there's just something really beautiful in that to me. In The Little Prince, I mean, there's a scene where the pilot, for those who don't know, it's about a pilot who crashes his plane, and this little character, this little prince, comes to him and asks him to draw him a sheep. Anyway, within there, they talk, and they eventually decide to go search for a well in the desert, because the aviator can't fix his plane. And there's a part where the pilot has to carry this little prince, this little child, through the desert to find the well. And it's the prince, and it's the aviator's interactions with the prince that ultimately lead him to the well. So it's all very symbolic, but something that I really took from that was sometimes it's us being reacquainted with that childlike version of ourselves that brings us to the well in the desert, that brings us to salvation, that brings us to God. I would consider the current times we're living in, these times of cold, these times of death and lack of joy and all these things that can surround us. It feels like we're in a desert. It feels like this wintry cold time, or this dry and dusty time. It's why I think having this belief and being reacquainted with our childhood self, it is what will get us through. It is where we will find meaning, and it is where we will find life again. So I will leave you with one final quote. This is by Francis P. Church, and it says, "Alas, how dreary would be the world if there was no Santa Claus. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence." I absolutely love that quote. I believe it. It's true. I hope that this podcast has helped reignite some of that magic, some of that belief in your heart, and that it will bring all of the magic that you have craved for your Christmas season. And with this, I will leave you, and I hope that all of you have a very Merry Christmas. If I don't get to the Nativity episode that I really want to do, then we'll definitely do it for next Christmas. But I love you all so much. Please leave me a comment with your thoughts. If you have any questions, I love hearing from you guys. I love hearing your thoughts. Share with me what you think, or if there's anything I left out, please leave it in a comment or message me on Instagram. And I love you guys so much. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a very, very good night.